There's a movie called The Color Purple, but it sure doesn't have anything to do with American history and the military. This was classified information, very secret. Nobody knew anything about this for 20 years, and finally they decided they could release the information. But I wanted you to know about this because it happened during World War II, an error soon to be forgotten, because there won't be anybody around to tell you about it. My mother was over in her rocking chair doing her crocheting. My dad across the room reading the newspaper as usual. Of course, this was after supper. And he dropped the newspaper down and he says, "Mom, do you know anybody named Frank Byron Riley?" She said, "Yeah. He's my first cousin. Why are you asking?" "Well, there's an article in the local newspaper about him." "Well, what in the world did he do?" "Well, President Johnson just presented him with a check for $100,000. $100,000 for what?" "He broke the Japanese code during World War II. That was 20 years before. This was classified information, very secret. Nobody knew anything about this for 20 years, and finally they decided they could release the information. Now the reporters were there, asking all sorts of questions. They were trying to get biographical information from Frank, and no, he was a closed-mouthed person. He was not revealing anything more than his name and identification numbers. So they said the invention was a cipher machine. Now, any of you who read up on military material and have read about one war after another and about breaking codes, you know what I'm talking about. He had invented a code-breaking machine. Now, let me see. The reporters, or the Secret Service, said to the reporters, "This is the most secret thing that has ever happened, more secret than anything in Secret Service. This man is a genius on the same order of Thomas Edison and Alexander Graham Bell." Now they were talking about my mother's first cousin. They grew up together in East Tennessee and Southwest Virginia. Frank Byron Riley grew up in Rose Hill, Virginia. Now you people in Virginia should be very proud of this man for what he did during World War II. Riley was the man who 25 years ago broke the Japanese code. Among other direct results was America's victory in the Battle of Midway in June 1942, the turning point of the war. Now, when I say that, it might remind you of something. Did you ever watch the movie? It was made about 1978 with Charlton Heston called Battle at Midway. I've seen that movie time and time again, and it's usually shown around 4th of July. Veterans Day, anything that had to do with a military holiday, that's when you would see Battle at Midway. Now, the point of this movie was the Japanese were planning an attack on the United States. Now, they had already bombed Pearl Harbor. That was December 7th, 1941. This was June 1942. So the Americans had to find out if it was an island, military base. They knew they were planning an attack, but they couldn't figure out where. So they were able to decipher the Japanese codes. And someone in the military said, let's try this. They keep talking about their attack on purple, the color purple. But where is purple? What would that be? Okay, let's send a message to Midway. They'll get this message. And we'll send a special message to Midway and tell them to ask us to send drinking water. They were running low on drinking water on the island. So they went through that process. They did their coding message back to the United States and asked for them to send drinking water to Midway. Okay, the Japanese picked up that code, and with my cousin's code-breaking machine, he was able to decipher the code. And they were planning to attack the island called Purple. They said the Americans at Purple are asking for drinking water. That was it. That was it. Now they knew the attack that the Japanese had planned, so they were ready for them. This is what they called the turnaround of the war. In other words, thousands of lives were being saved. So this was due to the invention of the cipher machine. Now, what I have read, the people working under Frank Byron Rowlett were Native American. And in the story, it says they never made a mistake. In fact, I've got the book called The Story of Magic. You see the man right here? That's my cousin, Frank Byron Rowlett. That's President Johnson. Down here is a picture of him years later and his son, Thomas Rowlett. And they're looking at a cipher machine at the museum in Washington, D.C. Now, I remember going to family reunions, and I only remember one when our cousin was there. And everybody, of course, then knew he was more or less a celebrity to us because he was an important man in Washington. The award he received here, National Security Award. The National Security Award is the highest award given to anyone. During the years, he had received 10 special awards. And looking at the book, there are pictures in this book that show the military. Oh, Allen Dulles, President Eisenhower, all sorts of pictures. And this man is being credited with his invention. If you went to Washington, D.C. today, you would see, well, you have to cross over into Maryland. There's a building there called the Frank Byron Rowlett Building. The National Security Award today is given every year to someone, the highest honor that you can ever receive. And it's called the Frank Byron Rowlett National Security Award. He is also listed in a military Hall of Fame. Now, this book was sent to me by his son. I talked to him on the phone. It was sent, well, I'll put it this way. My mother was in the nursing home in 1998, and she died July 1998. Frank died either 3 weeks before or 3 weeks after my mother did. It was 2 months later that his book, The Story of Magic, was published. So this young man sent me a copy of the book. And inside the book, I happen to have 2 copies. This is not the one that has his signature stamped. Instead of his handwritten signature being handwritten, it is stamped inside the book because he had been dead 2 months when it was published. I'm very proud of this book. I've tried to read it, but a lot of it I don't understand. Because when you're talking about cipher machines and breaking codes, you're way out of my realm of thinking. But I wanted you to know about this because it happened during World War II. An error soon to be forgotten because there won't be anybody around to tell you about it. And one of the most important men during that era was my mother's first cousin, Frank Byron Rowlett.
Clock is ticking, soft and low. Pages turn, my thoughts still glow. Lo-fi lights in evening air, peace and rhythm everywhere. Every sound's a gentle way, carrying peace the way I crave. Soft bass hums, my breathing slow, letting every worry go. Slow mind flow, keep me still, smooth groove bends to my will. While I study, while I dream, life feels calm in this gentle stream.